The iPhone 14 Pro and the Samsung Galaxy S22 Plus are both priced at $999, and there is one question: which should you buy? So in this video, I'm going to be putting them to the test because I have been using both these phones daily and I'm spoiled for choice on what phone to use permanently, because there are some features that I love on the S22 Plus and there are others that I love on the iPhone 14 Pro. So which is the better phone and which is the better value for money? Let's find out. As I said, both the iPhone 14 Pro and the S22 Plus start at $999, and anything higher than that is just overkill. Both these phones are the definitive editions in my opinion, and the price tag is a pretty sweet spot. Expensive but reasonable in today's market. Unlike Samsung and their flagships, Apple does not reduce the prices of their phones after a couple of months, and they also have better resale value than Samsung years later. So that is something to consider when deciding what phone to get. Now, the body and the form factor of both these phones are very similar. They both have a square design with a matte finish that is very smooth, and a slight difference here is that the S22 Plus has an aluminum frame while the iPhone 14 Pro has a stainless steel frame, which adds to the very boxy look already. Now, the iPhone 14 Pro has a better grip but will give you hand fatigue due to its weight, coming in at 206 grams, while the S22 Plus is 196 grams. Both are scratch resistant and can withstand a drop to a hard floor, but just like every other phone that I have, I put a case on mine just to be on the safe side. Now, where the S22 shines the most is the back of the phone. Now, let's be real. The pink gold color or the black is the more distinct color than the purple on the iPhone 14 Pro. The camera bumps are very similar to their models and are very distinctive when telling them apart due to their design language. Now, on the sides, the S22 Plus has the power button and the volume button on the right side, while the iPhone 14 Pro has the power button on the right side and the volume button on the left side of the phone. Personally, I prefer everything to be on one side of the phone, whether it be on the left or the right. So the S22 Plus is better suited for me. Now, at the bottom, the S22 Plus has the USB-C port, which makes more sense because everything right now is USB-C, but the iPhone 14 Pro still has the lightning cable, but with the new law passed by the EU, the iPhone 15 might have USB-C cable, or maybe, just maybe, Apple gives us a portless iPhone instead. I won't be surprised. Anyway, speakers on these phones are both loud and good enough to listen to music and your podcast anywhere you go. Now, when it comes to the display, Samsung has the better display, but don't write off Apple yet because technically Samsung still makes some of their displays. Now, on paper, the iPhone 14 Pro is a Super Retina OLED panel with HDR10 and a 120Hz refresh rate. Now, because it is an LTPO panel, it can go as low as 1 Hz when scrolling through, and that saves battery in the long term. Now, the 6.1-inch display makes it easier to reach all corners of the phone with ease. Now, on the S22 Plus, it is the better display. It's sharp, is more vibrant with HDR10 Plus, and a 120Hz refresh rate. Unlike the iPhone though, it's not an LTPO panel. This can only go as low as 48 Hz. When it comes to the brightness, both phones are bright, but the iPhone produces more with 2000 nits of peak brightness. When used outside, you won't have any issues on both phones. Now, if I'm being honest, the difference isn't so clear, and it's better to even watch how bright you want your phone to be because of the battery life. And speaking of battery life, I speak with facts and authority when I say the battery on the iPhone 14 Pro is way better than the battery on the S22 Plus by a long mile. On paper, the iPhone 14 Pro has a 3200 mAh of battery, while the S22 Plus has a 45 mAh of battery. Now, there shouldn't be any competition, and I know they say numbers don't lie, but in this case, it does. Now, the Snapdragon 8 Gen 1 chip is very power hungry and impacts the battery life significantly, whereas the more stable A16 Bionic chip is well optimized. Now, on the iPhone 14 Pro, I get about a day and a few hours of battery life, whereas on the S22 Plus is just a day. Now, this is not a bad thing, don't get me wrong, but you get more value for money on the iPhone 14 Pro than the S22 Plus. Now, a few other things that make these phones quite the same but different at the same time is how you unlock the phone. Now, the iPhone primarily uses Face ID, and this is very fast and it's a staple within Apple, whereas the S22 Plus uses different methods, but the most popular is the fingerprint scanner, which is an ultrasonic fingerprint scanner. It is fast, reliable, and a better way to secure your phone than Face ID. With new SoCs in both these phones with One UI and iOS, the software experience is very different. One UI is great, but it is still not my favorite skin on Android, but it has made improvements over the years and has grown on me so far. Now, I can say Samsung still has the most consistent version of Android since I started using the S22 Plus. Performance has not really dipped in any way possible, it's still very snappy when using it, and if you play games you will be very satisfied. One of the best things about One UI is the ability to be very customizable. Now I have a lock screen widget to see if I have any schedules or alarms and can design it to whatever I prefer. If you're also into applying themes and not installing different launchers, Samsung has different themes that you can choose from, especially when changing icons if the stock icons are not really your taste. Now, I'm a very simple person, and when it comes to my home screen, I just prefer a colorful wallpaper, 3 or 4 essential apps on the front, and I color code my apps for easier access. Whereas the A16 Bionic chip this year has made improvements with its performance and the new dynamic island. Now here are a few examples of what you can do with it. Now when listening to music, you can adjust the controls of the music by pressing and holding it. You can also get into current apps in the background by tapping it. For calls and timers, you can access them here as well. Now with timers, you can see the countdown without having to go into the app itself. Now a lot more apps need to be optimized for the dynamic island, like SoundCloud for example, and I'll say this will be around the first quarter of 2023 till we see more apps that are comfortable with the new technology. Now I don't really have anything bad to say about it. Maybe it's a bit more intrusive when watching videos than the notch, but I see my eyes adjusting to it as time goes by. Now this is just basically Android versus iOS, and your choice depends on what your preference is and what ecosystem you currently are in. Now when it comes to the cameras, both the S22 Plus and the iPhone 14 Pro have a triple camera system, but they differ in terms of specs. Now the S22 Plus has a 50 megapixel main sensor, a 10 megapixel telephoto lens, and a 12 megapixel ultra wide lens. While the iPhone 14 Pro has a 48 megapixel on its main sensor, a 12 megapixel on the telephoto lens, and a 12 megapixel on the ultra wide lens. Now the difference is not so clear between these phones, and I realize it's also very subjective. Megapixels are not exactly the real story because the iPhone 14 Pro is still the better camera unit than the S22 Plus, especially when it comes to video. Now from a user perspective, you will get great shots with both these phones. Now when I tested them, they gave good color accuracy and are vibrant in good lighting conditions, and that also goes for the portrait mode and the ultra wide. Now although the ultra wide on the S22 Plus gave a more softer tone. Now where the S22 shines the most is its telephoto lens and that 30x zoom, whereas the iPhone only gets as far as 15x, but I wouldn't really worry about it because this feature isn't going to be used on a daily basis. Now what the iPhone does better is video recording. Now even though the S22 Plus shoots in 8K, the quality of the video camera on the 14 Pro is unmatched so far. It is hands down still the king of video recording. So if you want to start out as a content creator and you're on a budget, you should really consider the iPhone 14 Pro in that regard. Now between these two phones, you can't really go wrong. Both phones offer something different than the other. Now the iPhone 14 Pro is great with its build quality, the battery life and the camera, while the S22 Plus excels better with its display, customizations and its features. Either choice between these two phones, you can't even go wrong and you will not be disappointed. Thank you guys for watching this video, and if you like what you saw and you got any value from it, don't forget to like this video and consider subscribing to the channel. My name is KJOS and I will catch you guys in the next one where I talk all things tech.